China has over the years encouraged and invested in cultural exchanges and people-to-people interactions, especially between China and Africa. In Uganda, a student is using the Chinese language to promote art and culture. Tobius Nuwamanya's fluency in Mandarin is already earning him good reputation at Chinese functions. Here's CGTN's Hillary Ayesiga.
A Mandarin song about love, an art that Tobius Nuwamanya is skilled in. Tobias is now using his creativity to woo Chinese audiences in Uganda.
In Africa, we rarely play Chinese music, so I was of that dream that maybe in future I can become the African-based Chinese music singer. So that's why I had to record the Chinese song.
For 6 months, Tobias has been studying Chinese language here at Confucius Institute in Kampala. Like Tobias, many young people are joining the institute.
When you exchange Ugandan culture with Chinese culture, there is some benefit we get. We get to know how they do their things, and it helps us also to know how to promote our things.
Going through Mandarin lessons, these students believe learning the Chinese language could transform both their social lives and economic prospects. And tutors here believe this course is opening doors for many Ugandans who would love to do business with China.
If Uganda wants to develop like China developed, I think one of their greatest secrets, or their greatest secret, lies in their language and in their way of life.
The institute is now rolling out this program in selected schools across the country. And it won't be long before various Uganda-China social gatherings need their services. Hillary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala.
Let's get more insights now and analysis on China's soft power and perceptions across Africa from Dr. Sebastiano Rwengabo. He's a political scientist and research fellow at the Advocates Coalition for Development and Environment. He's joining me now live from Kampala. Dr. Rwengabo, thank you for joining me on Africa Live. Now, China has made quite significant investment on media and cultural exchanges in Africa. Do you get the sense that there is a better understanding of China in Africa now compared to previous years?
It's always a process. It's not many years since China has been trying to promote its culture and its presence in Africa, having opened up itself globally around 1978. And it hasn't been long enough. China's economy has also not been strong enough pre-1980 to allow it to promote serious deepening of understanding of China on the African continent, but I think it is improving over and over time, especially with the increased presence of Chinese people's investments and cultural interventions in Africa.
So why is this investment into what some analysts describe as soft power important to China?
Normally, investments in what people call soft power are intended to increase acceptance and legitimacy of an upcoming power vis-a-vis other actors on the global stage. You need to understand that this is a strategic repositioning strategy that China is trying to undertake to ensure that it is received in Africa more harmoniously, more peacefully, and more easily than the previous contacts Africa had with the outside world. Previous contacts, for instance, with the European visitors to Africa were such that the European culture had been fused with elements of Christianity, and when they came here, they said anything that was not Christian was satanic. And so the exchange was condescending towards the African culture. But the Chinese are moving slowly. They are saying, we will be willing to learn from you. You will be willing to learn from us. So it now becomes a kind of cultural exchange. It's not equal, but it's a kind of cultural exchange that allows the Chinese to learn African bits of African culture and the Africans to learn bits of Chinese culture. And the objective is to make sure that the Chinese and China are received on the African continent more peacefully, more positively than the previous, especially European visitors to Africa.
So you're talking about a cultural exchange between China and Africa being a both-way cultural exchange and a win-win perception for both China and Africa. So there are interactions between Africans and Chinese today, including the formal exchanges through the Confucius Institutes and scholarship programs. How can African nations leverage this increased interactions and opportunities for their own benefit?
You need to understand that the Chinese themselves first need to benefit from Africa. They need to learn a bit of the African culture. They need to pick some of the African cosmological and cultural ideas and principles that, in my opinion, would enrich what is considered Confucian culture, because there are not significant differences between Confucianism and the various African cultural and traditional beliefs and practices and principles. Now, what Africans could do, in my opinion, is to negotiate the terms of these exchanges so that where there is Confucian Institute in Africa, then there is a Swahili language training institute in China. Where there is a Confucian Institute in Africa, there is an Igbo language training institute in China, so that as the Africans learn Chinese and Chinese culture, the Chinese are also learning African culture and practices. But two, when you look at those institutions, universities, and other training opportunities, I think one needs to appreciate that Chinese, especially higher institutions of learning, are still developing. They are not yet at the level of the Ivy League or Oxbridge categories of universities. Now, Africans need to determine the kinds of skills that we need, the kinds of trainings, the niche, what I could consider niche training and capacity building opportunities that we need from China, so that we don't just go to China for the sake of every scholarship and into every university, but we go to only those universities that we think, for instance, can enhance our science and technology, innovation and invention skills and capacities, as well as expose us to the global competitive era in which ICTs and similar technologies are taking over the world.
Right, Dr. Sebastiano Ruwengabo joining us there from Kampala.